Hello again. This is David Black, and today we're going to learn how to use Inkscape, which is a vector illustration program. Now, it's a little bit different than some of the software I've taught you before, in that so far we've focused on browser-based software, which is free and online. Inkscape is free, but it's not an online program. You do have to download it to a local computer, which means that it will not work on a Chromebook. There are programs that are online, which are browser-based, that can do vector illustration, but they are lacking some very important features. These include Vector, which is VECTR, and Boxy SVG, and there are a number of others. Now, in a pinch, you can use them. They do have a pen tool. They do have the basic shapes and other features that you need. But if you want to do some advanced things like gradient meshes, then Inkscape is definitely a good program to work with. The most important thing to learn in a vector illustration program is how to work with the pen tool so that you can create irregular curved shapes. To begin, you need to know how vector illustration programs such as Adobe Illustrator work. Photoshop, Photopea, Procreate, and other painting programs use pixels to build an image on a computer. The image, such as a photograph, is broken down into tiny squares that can be selected and have their color changed, and they can be stacked upon each other in layers. These are called pixels. These programs are great for creating detailed changes in color and for editing photographs, but they have one drawback. The pixels don't enlarge very well. If the image has a low resolution or pixels per inch, when the image is blown up, it becomes pixelated. You can see the staircase shape of the edges. The images also take up a great deal of file space as each pixel needs to be described. They are even large files when compression is applied. Vector illustration programs like Inkscape use a completely different system for making images. Instead of pixels, they use shapes and equations. The advantage of this is that the shapes can be stacked on top of each other. They don't require very much space because all you have to do is describe the fill color and the equation of the outline and the points in it. And then you can blow them up however you want to, and you do not lose resolution or quality because all you do is redefine the equations for the shapes. Of all of the free vector-based illustration programs, Inkscape has the very best feature set. So we're going to learn that today. Let's get started. So here is a new document inside of Inkscape. What I'd like to show you is how to make some basic shapes. As you can see from the toolbar over here on the left-hand side, you have square or rectangular shapes, you have circle shapes, you have polygonal shapes, 3D objects, spirals. So these are all presets that you can create and change. Then there is the pen tool, which we'll be talking about in quite a bit of detail, a drawing tool, which just does free-form pencil shapes, a brush tool, and so on. Let's begin just by using a simple rectangular shape. So if I choose that, I can come over here and drag it out. There it is. Over on the right-hand side, it shows me my color selector. And let's just talk about this for a moment. At the top, you have the basic hue, which is a rainbow going from red at 0 to red at 360. But if I pick something like blue in the middle here, that gives it a color of 233 on the basic hue. But then there's also saturation and lightness. So saturation gives you the most intense color, and lightness gives you a tint or shade from black to white with the intense color in the middle. Then underneath it, the A stands for alpha. That means the transparency of that particular color, from 0 up to 100%. So right now what I have selected is a color hue of 233 at 100% saturation and about 58% lightness darkness, meaning about in the middle, but slightly on the light side. Now, if I come over here, I've got my basic shape, and if I use my shape selection tool, which is the top black arrow, I can move that shape around. I can drag out the corners, make the rectangle whatever size I want to. Now, if I click on the object more than once, I get rotation controls. So I can drag on a corner and rotate the shape around. Here it's back to resizing. If I drag out a corner, I can skew the rectangle and turn it into a parallelogram. Or I can resize it, click on it again and rotate it. And remember, I can also choose things like turning down the opacity of it. That's the alpha. So if I want to, I can create another shape. Let's do like a circular object here. And I'm going to make it more, say, a purple color. I'll turn up the alpha here. If I stack them on top of each other, right now the purple shape is in front of the blue shape. To change the stacking order of shapes inside of their layers, you have to drag them and you can choose them over here, but then drag them and move them until you see this green bar move around. I'm going to take the circular path, select it, and drag it down beneath the rectangle. So now you can see that the rounded rectangle is transparent. I turn down the alpha on it. As we've been selecting these shapes and moving them around, you probably noticed that they have corners that allow you to take each of the different parts and shape them individually and resize them, reform them. These corners are called anchor points, and they're very important in making a shape. The best way to imagine how one of these shapes work is to imagine that you have a room that has a bungee cord stretched across it. In the middle of the room, you've attached a broom handle. Now you can take the two ends of that broom handle and twist them around, and in the process, you're going to reform or deform the curved segment that's the bungee cord. That's basically how one of these curved shapes works. These shapes are called Bezier curves, and we need to spend a little bit of time to talk about why they're called that. Back in the 1950s and 60s, the Renault car company in France was faced with a very difficult problem. They needed to create cars that consumers demanded that were more streamlined and curved in shape, more aerodynamic. But the people who made the molds or dies that produced the parts were getting older, and they were beginning to retire, and a master die creator has to be able to make a shape that's very nicely curved on one side, but then create its mirror image for the other side. So a mathematician and engineer by the name of Pierre-Étienne Bezier decided to try to solve this problem by creating a computer program that could create the kind of curves and shapes that were necessary for this kind of modeling. He received his doctorate to try to solve this problem. And what he developed was a system of line segments that could be controlled. They were defined by anchor points, which in these programs are usually shown as little diamonds or squares, and then the curved segment between those anchor points is controlled by a series of control points and control lines. That's the broom handle. The line segment itself is the bungee cord. Making these Bezier curves can be a little bit tricky. It actually is muscle memory. You have to keep practicing it until you've got the basic pattern and process down. When using the pen tool, there are three basic types of corners or anchor points. I call them sharp, smooth, and scalloped, and I'd like to show you how to make each one of them in turn. Let's begin with the sharp point. So here's the pen tool. It's the one down here on the left that looks like a fountain pen tip. What I'm going to do is start out by making sharp cornered shapes. And to do that, you just point where you want the anchor points to be, and then click without dragging. Let's say that I want to make a 5-pointed star here. Okay, so click. Let's come over here. You can see this red line dragging behind you, and click, and click. Now this is not going to be perfect. It's not going to look very good. Every single corner I'm just clicking. When I get back to the starting corner, it will light up, and if I click on that, now it's making my fill color. At this point, I can come back with my point selection tool, move these points around to improve and fix how this star looks, until I get something that looks a little bit nicer and conforms to what we think of a star as being. Now again, if I choose this with my shape selection tool and click on it more than once, I can rotate it around and put it pretty much where I want the star to be. Now let's practice doing smooth corners. So going back to the pen tool, a smooth corner is one that has an anchor point with control lines and points coming out of it. Those control lines form a straight line, so it's like the broom handle attached to your bungee cord. I'm going to try to make a shape that looks like a big fat S. So if I start down here, let's make a point. So what you do is that you hold down your mouse and click, and then I use my other finger, I'm on a trackpad, to drag out a control line. There we go. If you're using a mouse, then you just hold the mouse down as you drag this out. I'm kind of thinking where my next point's going to be, and I'm dragging about a third of the distance in the direction of that new anchor point. Now I've released my mouse. Going to the next one, see how this red curve is coming behind it. So I want the next point to be about here. So I'm going to click and drag out. Now as I drag this out, it's going to reform the line segment behind me. I'm also thinking ahead to where my next shape's going to be. So let's say I want to go about there. I'm releasing the mouse. Now the next one will be over here. So click, drag out a third, release. Now I need to kind of go around the corner here. So click, drag, release. I'm going to come back along here. Let's put another one about here. Click to drag this out to make it more of a smooth corner. Now the next one needs to be about here. Remember, I'm making a fat S shape. So I click, I'm going to drag it in this direction. Let's come over here, click, drag, release. Now finally come back to where I began and click and drag out to finish the control lines on this first point. Okay, and then it fills in the object with the color that I've had selected. Now this is good, but it's not exactly what I want it to be. So now that the shape is complete, I'm going to go to the point selection tool, or what's called here the Edit Paths by Nodes tool. Okay, that's kind of a mouthful. I'll just call it the point selection tool. And I can pick any one of these points and it will show the anchor point and then the control lines and points that go with it. Let's move this over here like this. I can adjust this control line, make it a little bit steeper. That means I need to move this over and maybe turn this out so it's not curved quite so much. So you come back and reform it and make it however exactly you want it to be. Now finally, let's do the trickiest corner of all, the scalloped corner. We're going to make a heart. So I will come back to my pen tool. Now to make a heart, again, I'm going to hold down with my thumb here, or in your case, if you're using a mouse, just hold down the normal mouse key. Hold this down, then I'm dragging out with my finger where the control line is going to go. I'm making the right side of the heart. Coming up here to like the top right side of the heart to drag this out. And now here's the corner that's going to be scalloped, about here. So I'm going to click and hold down my mouse and drag it to finish up the corner behind it. But here's the important part. Before I let go of my mouse, I'm going to hold down Shift on the keyboard. In Adobe Illustrator, it's the Alt or Option key, but in Inkscape, it's Shift. Hold this down, and then it will allow me to swing this point around in the new direction. I've just created a V shape with the control lines, and that makes a scalloped point. Okay, now I'm releasing everything, coming over here to make the left side of the heart, something like that, and then coming back to the starting point and clicking and dragging again. Okay, that's pretty good, but it's not perfect. When you make these shapes, they never will be. So please get rid of your perfectionistic tendencies and just finish the object, then you can come back and fix it. So going to the point selection tool, I need to move this down. Even just doing that looks good. In this case, my control lines are too long. So let's shorten them down a little bit. Make these about a little bit more even. And there we have a pretty decent heart. Now that you've practiced and have successfully made shapes that use all three types of corners, you might think, oh, I'm done, I've done that. But it's something that takes a lot of practice. You want to get so smooth and fluent at making these corners that you can do it almost without thinking. That's why I say this is really muscle memory. So what I'd like you to do is to pause this video and come back to it in a minute, but take and practice these shapes. So do sharp cornered shapes, do smooth cornered shapes, do the heart with its scalloped corner in it, and keep doing that not only until you can make them at will, but make them quickly and fluently. This might take dozens of times to practice it. So go ahead and start practicing. Turn off the video and then I'll meet you on the flip side. Okay, you're back. Congratulations on beginning to master the pen tool. You've still got a ways to go, but at least now you're familiar enough with it that you can make the types of shapes that you want to. A lot of it is just kind of thinking ahead to where those points are going to be and then making sure you drag out a third of the distance to the next shape. It really is kind of a process. So you click and drag out about a third of the distance to the next point, then release, go to the next point, click and drag out to finish the segment behind you. But then, before you release, you hold down Shift, swing it around, and then point it towards the next point is going to be. You won't get everything right the first time. It's not going to look perfect. Don't be a perfectionist here. Just continue building the shape until you have it done. You've completed and finished off the object. Then you go back with the point selection tool and you perfect the points. You move the anchor points around, you move the control lines and control points around until it looks the way you want. But it will not be perfect the first time. Where a lot of students fall short when they're first learning this, they'll click and drag out a control line and then release it and realize they don't quite like that control line, so they try to click back on it and drag it again, but that just makes another anchor point. Pretty soon they have this twisted mess of a curved segment. Don't do that. If you haven't made it the way you want, just keep going until you have completed the object, then go back and edit it with the point selection tool. Now, for your next step, let's do something that's moderately challenging. I'm going to have you make the stem of a flower. It's going to include 2 leaves and a curved stem in the middle, and this will all be done as one shape. So there'll be quite a few scalloped corners in it. Let me demonstrate how to do this. So I'm going to use my pen tool and create the stem. And so we're going to try to make this all as one shape using a continuous draw of the pen tool. So let's start. I'm going to click down here. I'm starting by doing kind of the left side of the main stem. I'm going to have it curve, so I'm going to have it come up to here and curve. But now I want to make the first leaf. So before I let go of my mouse, I'm going to hold down Shift and swing this around to make the bottom of the first leaf, about in that direction. The leaf's going to stick over here to the side, so I'll click and drag this out. Hold down Shift, swing it around. I'll come back about to where I started here and complete the shape. Hold down Shift and swing it around. Now I'm heading in the direction that I began, about this. Okay, hold down Shift, swing it around. I'm making a new leaf now. Bring it over here. Hold down Shift, swing it around. Come back to where the stem is. Make the top of the leaf. Hold down Shift, swing it around. Now let's make the very top of the stem. I'm just going to click and make some sharp corners. But now I'm going to make another leaf. Hold down Shift, swing this around. Leaf comes out to here. Swing it around, holding down Shift to where it attaches to the stem again, about here. Hold down Shift, swing it around. Ooh, I'm making this too fat. So I made a mistake there. And let's kind of go over here. Okay, so I'm going to have to fix that. Doesn't look so good. Hold down Shift, swing it around, make the end of the leaf. Hold down Shift, swing it around, making the bottom of the leaf. Lots of scalloped points here. Hold down, dragging this out, holding down Shift, swinging it around. Let's come down to the bottom of the stem. I can now swing it around to go back to where I started and click. Okay, and let's make this green. That's a little bit more like it. And it's not bad, but there are problems. So I choose my point selection tool and I got to fix the control lines here. The main problem is that they are too long and so they're crossing over each other and that's making it really twisted. That your control line should never go out more than about a third of the distance to where the next point is. So that's looking better. Let's bring this in a bit. I've got control lines crossing over here, so I want to shorten them. I also would like kind of the top of this leaf to have a little scallop shape, about like that. And the bottom of the leaf be about here, but this needs to be a little smoother down here. So I move this down over here with a few really fast, quick edits. I can make the leaves do more what I want them to do. So when the control lines go in different directions on a particular segment, you get an S-shaped curve. If they're going in the same direction, you get a C-shaped curve. You can change and fix anything. Just get her done, and then you can fix it. All right, that's a nice stem. Now the next part of this, let's go ahead and make the flower. Now we could make this as one shape just using the pen tool and extremely scalloped corners, and that would be worth practicing. But there is an easier way. You can build this by making one petal and then duplicating it and rotating it around a common center point, then taking all the petals and joining them together with an additive Boolean command. Let me show you how to do that. So we're going to start out by making an ellipsoid shape. And having made that, let's make this a little bit more of a compatible color. Let's say kind of, well, like a reddish purple. That's nice. I think I don't want that stroke color anymore. So going back to my stroke paint, let's make it more the kind of color that we're after. That looks good. Okay, so having created one petal, I want to duplicate it and rotate it around. Now there is a command here under Edit, which is duplicate, or Command D. So if I do that, it makes a copy of it that you can drag out here. Now I can also rotate this if I click on it so you can see the rotate commands, but I can also change the center point of this object and put it over here. So when I do rotate it, it rotates around that new center point. Okay, now let's repeat the process. I'm going to do Command D. Okay, here it is. And then let's rotate around that center point, about like that. Now that looks pretty good. But what we want now is to take these shapes and combine them all together. So I'm going to click on these. If I hold down Shift, I can click each object. Now if I drag out my mouse and make sure I cover all parts of all the shapes, it will select them all here. So I've got them all. Now if I go up under Path, I've got all of the Boolean commands, and I can choose Union. And there it is. They're all combined together into one shape. They're all overlapping. So I'm doing like an orange color, then turning up the alpha so you can see it. There, that's nice. Okay, now using the Shape Selection tool, I can move this over and put it on top of our flower stem. Now that we have the flower completed and it has a nice radial gradient in it, and we've combined it with the stem, our project is basically finished. Now there are many advanced features that we can still learn, but we'll do that in another video. At this point, you've pretty much completed the project that I want you to learn, and you're on your way to mastering vector-based illustration. Now think of all the possibilities for using vector illustration for creating science media projects. Anytime you need to make a technical illustration or a diagram of a process, vector illustration is a really good way to go. There's a well-known style of posters that was first kind of popularized by the National Park Service for showing different national parks. But this same style has been used for a lot of things. NASA has even used this style for creating posters for interstellar travel, if you will, for exoplanets. You've maybe seen some of these. Even the Utah Valley Visitors Bureau has used it for making posters for local attractions. The advantage, of course, is you can take and blow these up to be whatever size you want them to be, like these giant murals that they painted based on the posters they've created. I hope that you can continue to practice your vector illustration skills until you can use it for a variety of projects. So here are some examples of projects that you can create using vector illustration. Here is a diagram of a space probe. One of the common uses is to create a single-page document like a flyer or an illustration from this. Vector illustration is a critical skill for any professional media designer. As always, thank you for watching, and keep on learning.